Linda Morales pulled her coat tighter against the crisp autumn air as she stepped onto the manicured grounds of the Anderson estate. The sprawling mansion in the heart of New York City's elite Upper East Side loomed like a castle, its pristine stone facade reflecting the wealth and privilege of its owner. Inside, Linda moved deftly through the grand hallways, her simple uniform a stark contrast to the opulence around her. She was diligent, invisible in her role, but not by choice. She had learned early on that in this world of power and luxury, people like her, immigrants, working class, unseen, were expected to serve without leaving a trace of their presence. Peter Anderson, the master of the house, was at the top of New York's social ladder. A successful real estate tycoon with a reputation for charm. He commanded respect and admiration wherever he went. But beneath the polished exterior lay a man used to bending others to his will. Linda had discovered this side of him during the months of their secret affair, a forbidden, intoxicating whirlwind that had filled her days with equal parts excitement and dread. Linda glanced at her reflection in the mirror of the grand dining room as she polished the silver candlesticks. She looked tired, her dark eyes heavy with the weight of secrets. Secrets that would soon explode into the open. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Linda sat nervously on the edge of her bed in the small staff quarters of the Anderson mansion. The envelope in her lap felt heavier than it should have. Inside was the result of a test that would change her life forever. The trembling of her hands made opening the envelope a challenge. The words jumped out at her in stark black letters, positive. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her heart pounding. A surge of emotions washed over her, fear, joy, uncertainty. But one thing was certain, she had to tell Peter. That night, as Peter sipped his expensive scotch in his study, Linda approached him. Her voice wavered, but her resolve did not. "Peter," she began, her voice breaking the room's heavy silence. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Peter looked up, his expression annoyed at being interrupted. But when Linda told him the truth, his face transformed, shock, anger, and something colder, harder. "What are you saying?" he demanded, his tone sharp. "You're pregnant?" Linda nodded, trying to meet his gaze. "It's yours, Peter. I thought you should know." The silence that followed was deafening. Peter stood abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. "This cannot happen," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you understand what this would do to me? My career? My family? My reputation? Peter, please," Linda pleaded. "This isn't just about you. This is about a child. Our child." But Peter's response was ice cold. "You'll leave tonight. I'll have my lawyers arrange a severance package. Don't contact me again." Linda stared at him in disbelief. The man who had whispered sweet nothings to her, who had promised her the world, now stood before her as a stranger. Linda packed her belongings in a daze. She had given so much to the Anderson family, her time, her labor, her trust, and now, she was discarded like she never mattered. As she walked out of the mansion for the last time, the grandeur of the estate felt oppressive, mocking her in her lowest moment. On the cold streets of New York, Linda clutched her suitcase and fought back tears. She had nowhere to go, no savings, and now, a child to raise on her own. But as despair threatened to consume her, she looked down at her stomach, placing a protective hand over it. "I'll figure this out," she whispered to herself. "For you." The first night was the hardest. She slept in a shelter, surrounded by strangers, the stark reality of her situation sinking in. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, Linda's spirit remained unbroken. She refused to let Peter's betrayal define her or her child's future. The days turned into weeks as Linda began rebuilding her life. She found a job waiting tables at a diner. The hours long and grueling, but it was honest work. Every dollar she earned went towards saving for her child's future. Though her body grew heavier with the pregnancy, her resolve only strengthened. But Peter's actions haunted her. She often found herself wondering how someone could so easily discard another person. How the man who had once shared her laughter could turn his back so completely. Linda resolved to never let her child feel unwanted. "You'll have everything," she promised her unborn baby one night, staring out the tiny window of her rented room. "Even if I have to move mountains for you." Months later, Linda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Ethan, after a character in one of her favorite books, a name that symbolized strength and resilience. Holding him for the first time, She felt a surge of love so powerful it erased every doubt and fear she had harbored. Ethan became her anchor, her reason to keep fighting. As he grew, Linda poured all her love and energy into him, even in the face of financial struggles and long hours at work. She never wavered in her dedication to giving Ethan a life filled with love and hope. Yet, in the back of her mind, the memory of Peter lingered, a wound that had never fully healed. She didn't know then that the wound would one day be reopened, leading to a battle that would shake their lives to the core. The winter of New York was unforgiving, much like Linda's current reality. Ethan, now a lively toddler, was the center of her universe. Every giggle, every curious glance he gave her reminded Linda of why she endured so much. But balancing 2 shifts at the diner while raising a child alone was taking its toll. The cramped apartment they lived in barely kept out the cold. Linda would wrap Ethan in layers of blankets at night, watching him sleep as she planned her next move. Despite her exhaustion, she refused to let despair win. "I'll find a way," she repeated to herself every day, her mantra against the gnawing fear of failure. One morning, after working a double shift, Linda went to a local community center seeking assistance. She sat in a fluorescent-lit room, filling out forms for government aid, only to face endless bureaucratic hurdles. "You don't qualify," the clerk said curtly, without looking up from her screen. "You make too much for assistance, but not enough for subsidized housing." Linda felt the sting of tears behind her eyes but swallowed them. "There has to be a mistake. I can barely afford rent," she argued. The clerk merely shrugged, sending Linda away with nothing but more forms and a pamphlet about food banks. It was here that Linda first felt the true weight of the systemic inequities stacked against people like her: immigrants, single mothers, women of color. No matter how hard she worked, the system seemed designed to keep her from rising above her circumstances. As Ethan grew older, he began asking questions that Linda found difficult to answer. One night, as they shared a simple dinner of rice and beans, Ethan looked at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mom, why don't I have a dad like the other kids at school?" he asked. The question hit Linda like a blow. She hesitated, her fork hovering midair. "Ethan, your dad, he's not with us because he made some bad choices. Did he love us?" Ethan pressed, his voice small but insistent. Linda's throat tightened. "He doesn't know what he's missing, sweetheart," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan nodded, satisfied for now, but the conversation lingered in her mind long after he had gone to bed. Despite the struggles, Linda found moments of kindness in unexpected places. The diner where she worked was frequented by a diverse crowd, from construction workers to office executives. Among them was Mrs. Clara Hartwell, an elderly woman who came in every Thursday afternoon for a slice of pie and coffee. "You're a hard worker, dear," Mrs. Hartwell commented one day, watching Linda juggle orders with ease. "Reminds me of my younger days." Over time, the two women struck up a tentative friendship. Clara, widowed and without children, became a quiet source of support for Linda. She offered advice, a listening ear, and occasionally slipped her a $20 bill, insisting it was a tip. "Don't argue," Clara said one day as Linda tried to refuse. "I've got more money than I know what to do with. You've got Ethan. That boy deserves the world." It wasn't much, but these small gestures helped Linda feel less alone. Ethan thrived at school despite their struggles. He excelled in reading and art, earning praise from his teachers. His sketchbook became his prized possession, filled with drawings of fantastical worlds where heroes overcame insurmountable odds. One evening, he showed Linda a picture he had drawn of the two of them standing in front of a house with a big garden. "This is our future home," Ethan explained proudly. "When I grow up, I'm going to build it for us." Linda hugged him tightly, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. "You will, Ethan," she whispered. "You can do anything you set your mind to." Ethan's optimism became her fuel. In him, she saw the possibility of a better future, even if she couldn't yet see the path to it. One evening, Linda was cleaning out a drawer when she stumbled upon an old photograph of herself and Peter. The image transported her back to those days in the Anderson mansion, a time of innocence and betrayal. Her hands shook as she stared at Peter's face. The photo was a painful reminder of the man who had discarded her so easily. The man who had refused to acknowledge Ethan's existence. She almost threw it away but hesitated. Something deep inside told her to keep it. She tucked the photo back into the drawer, unaware of how it would soon resurface to upend her life. As the years passed, Linda's resolve hardened into something unbreakable. She no longer sought validation or apologies from Peter. Instead, her focus was on giving Ethan the life he deserved. On her days off, Linda took Ethan to the library, encouraging his love for books and learning. She attended his school plays, cheering louder than anyone else. And every night, she reminded him of his worth. "You're going to do amazing things, Ethan," she said. "Never let anyone make you feel like you're less than you are." In those moments, Linda felt a glimmer of hope. Despite the obstacles, she had built a foundation of love and resilience that nothing could take away. Systemic injustice. Highlighting the barriers Linda faces as a single mother and immigrant. Resilience and love. Linda's unwavering devotion to Ethan amidst hardship. Foreshadowing. The reappearance of the photo sets the stage for the eventual confrontation with Peter. Character growth. Ethan's optimism and talent provide a contrast to Linda's struggles, showing their shared resilience. It was a rainy afternoon when Ethan stumbled upon the photograph. At 15, he was a curious and observant teenager with a natural knack for finding hidden treasures, old comic books, forgotten toys, and now, a single faded photograph tucked into the back of a drawer in their modest apartment. "Mom?" Ethan called out, holding the picture carefully. He turned it over in his hands, inspecting the two smiling faces. One was unmistakably his mother, younger but just as beautiful, her eyes full of light and hope. The other was a man he didn't recognize, tall, sharply dressed, exuding confidence and charm. Linda froze when she saw the photo. Her breath hitched, and her heart raced as a storm of memories crashed over her. "Who is this?" Ethan asked, his tone curious but insistent. Linda hesitated. For years, she had shielded Ethan from the truth, believing it was better for him not to know. But now, faced with her son's determined gaze, she realized she couldn't avoid it any longer. "That's Peter Anderson," Linda said quietly, sitting down. "Your father." The room fell silent except for the steady patter of rain against the window. Ethan stared at the photograph, processing his mother's words. "My father?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why haven't I ever met him? Why doesn't he?" Linda took a deep breath. "He didn't want us, Ethan," she said, her voice breaking. "When I told him about you, he fired me. He told me to leave and never come back." Ethan's face twisted in anger and disbelief. "So he just abandoned us? Like we didn't matter?" Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to give you the best life I could without him. I didn't want you to grow up feeling like you were less than anyone else." Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. For years, he had wondered about his father, imagining different scenarios, none of which resembled the cruel reality his mother had just revealed. "That's not right," he said finally. "He can't just get away with it." Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The photograph sat on his bedside table, its presence a constant reminder of the man who had turned his back on them. He thought about the sacrifices his mother had made, the nights she came home exhausted from work, the times they went without because there simply wasn't enough. The next morning, Ethan approached Linda with an idea that had been brewing in his mind all night. "Mom, we should make him take responsibility. He owes us, he owes you." Linda shook her head. "Ethan, it's not that simple. Peter is powerful. He has money. Lawyers, people like us don't win against people like him. But that's exactly why we have to try," Ethan argued, his voice filled with passion. "You always taught me to stand up for what's right. This isn't just about us. It's about making sure he doesn't get to do this to anyone else." Linda looked at her son, seeing a fierceness in him that reminded her of herself when she was younger. Could she really take on Peter Anderson after all these years? The thought terrified her, but Ethan's determination sparked something deep within her, a long-dormant sense of justice. Linda and Ethan began to gather their thoughts. They knew they couldn't face Peter alone. Ethan suggested they start with people who had worked for him in the past. People who might have seen or known about his relationship with Linda. One by one, they reached out to former staff from the Anderson estate. Most were hesitant, fearing retaliation from Peter, but two agreed to speak with them. Maria Lopez, the former nanny, recalled seeing Peter and Linda together many times. "I always knew there was something between you two," Maria admitted, But I never said anything. Peter could be intimidating. Robert Kane, the chauffeur, added another layer to the story. I drove you to that clinic once. Remember? He said to Linda. I didn't say anything back then. But I thought it was wrong how he treated you. Their accounts were small pieces of a larger puzzle. But they gave Linda and Ethan the hope they needed to keep going. Through one of Linda's co-workers at the diner, she was introduced to Sarah Parker, a lawyer known for taking on difficult cases against powerful opponents. Sarah was in her late 30s, sharp and uncompromising, with a personal vendetta against men like Peter. Let me get this straight, Sarah said after listening to Linda's story. You were fired after revealing you were pregnant with his child. And he never provided any support? Linda nodded, clutching Ethan's hand. That's right. Sarah leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notepad. This won't be easy. Men like Peter don't play fair. But if we can prove what you're saying is true, we have a case: wrongful termination, child support, maybe even emotional damages. Ethan's eyes lit up. You'll help us? Sarah smiled. I don't back down from a fight. Let's get to work. Sarah helped Linda and Ethan begin the daunting task of collecting evidence. Linda searched through old belongings for anything that could tie her to Peter: letters, photographs, pay stubs. Ethan, determined to help, scoured the internet for anything he could find about Peter's history. Their determination began to pay off. Linda found an old journal where she had written about her time working for Peter, including dates and details of their relationship. Ethan discovered a series of news articles about other scandals Peter had narrowly avoided over the years, painting a picture of a man who had built his empire by crushing those who stood in his way. Word of their efforts eventually reached Peter. One afternoon, Linda received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, a smooth, familiar voice came through the line. Linda, Peter said, his tone deceptively calm. I hear you've been digging into the past. I'd advise you to stop before you regret it. Linda's hand shook, but she didn't let the fear show in her voice. I'm not afraid of you, Peter. His laughter was cold. You should be. When the call ended, Linda sat in silence, gripping the phone tightly. But instead of breaking her resolve, Peter's threat only fueled her determination. By the end of the week, Sarah had drafted the initial paperwork to file a lawsuit. The battle ahead would be long and grueling. But Linda and Ethan were ready. They knew they were up against a man who would stop at nothing to protect his reputation. But they also knew they had something he didn't: truth. We're going to make him pay, Sarah said, sliding the documents across the table. Not just for what he did to you, but for everyone else he's stepped on along the way. Linda signed her name with a steady hand, her gaze meeting Ethan's. For the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of hope. The Anderson mansion was an untouchable fortress, its gates closed to the world beyond. Yet, from a small office in downtown New York, Sarah Parker began drafting the legal documents that would threaten to bring it crumbling down. Linda Morales versus Peter Anderson, a name that sent ripples through the legal community as soon as the papers were filed. Peter's legal team, led by the notorious Charles Whitmore, responded swiftly with a motion to dismiss. This is a baseless attempt to tarnish my client's reputation, Whitmore declared in a press release. But Sarah was ready. We have evidence, witnesses, and a compelling story, she countered. This case isn't going away. With the case officially underway, Sarah intensified her efforts to find additional witnesses and evidence. Linda and Ethan worked tirelessly alongside her, often burning the midnight oil in the cramped office. Ethan took on the role of investigator, leveraging social media and public records to track down former employees and associates of Peter Anderson. Through sheer determination, he unearthed a treasure trove of information, including one particularly damning lead: a former housekeeper, Margaret Shields, who had been dismissed under similar circumstances years earlier. When Sarah contacted Margaret, the older woman was hesitant. I've tried to put that chapter behind me, she said, her voice tinged with fear. But after hearing Linda's story, she agreed to testify. It's time someone stood up to him, Margaret said. Peter's team wasted no time launching a counterattack. Within days, Linda found herself the target of vicious rumors spread by anonymous sources. Headlines labeled her a gold digger, a liar, and an opportunist. One morning, as Ethan scrolled through his phone, he saw a cruel post mocking Linda's appearance and their living conditions. His face flushed with anger. Mom, They can't do this to you, he exclaimed. Linda placed a calming hand on his shoulder. They're scared, Ethan. That's why they're trying to hurt us. But we won't let them win. Sarah advised them to stay strong. The louder they scream, the closer we are to the truth, she said. Still, the attacks took a toll, particularly on Linda, who faced whispers and stares even at her workplace. While going through Peter's old financial records, Ethan uncovered something unusual. A series of untraceable cash withdrawals made around the time Linda had been fired. Sarah connected the dots. These could be payments to keep someone quiet, she speculated. The breakthrough came when Robert Kane, the former chauffeur, remembered overhearing a heated phone conversation between Peter and his lawyers. He was panicked about something. Robert said, I didn't catch everything, but it had to do with covering his tracks. This new information provided a critical piece of evidence, reinforcing their claim that Peter had acted deliberately to erase Linda and Ethan from his life. Peter's legal team escalated their efforts, filing countersuits and bombarding Linda with demands for depositions. They hoped to bury her under a mountain of paperwork, forcing her to abandon the case. One particularly grueling day, Linda spent hours being grilled by Whitmore in a cold conference room. His questions were invasive and cutting, designed to humiliate her. Why didn't you go to someone else for help if Mr. Anderson refused? He asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Linda's hands clenched under the table. Because I trusted him, she replied, her voice steady. And because he was the father of my child. The truth in her words caused a stir, even in the sterile legal setting. Sarah gave her an encouraging nod, silently reminding her to stay strong. Ethan's role in the case continued to grow. During a family dinner, Linda noticed him scribbling furiously in a notebook. What are you working on? She asked. I'm writing down everything I remember, Ethan said. Every time you had to work late. Every time you told me we couldn't afford something because he wasn't there. I want the court to know what it was like for us. Linda's heart ached at his words, but she was proud of his resolve. You're so strong, Ethan, she said. But remember, this fight isn't just for us. It's for everyone who's been treated like we were. As the trial date approached, the case attracted increasing media attention. Reporters camped outside Linda's apartment, snapping photos and shouting questions whenever she stepped outside. News anchors dissected the case on primetime television, debating the morality of both parties. Sarah used the media spotlight to their advantage, presenting Linda's story as a David versus Goliath battle for justice. This isn't just about one woman or one child, she said during a televised interview. It's about holding powerful people accountable for their actions. Peter's camp responded with their own media blitz, portraying him as a victim of baseless accusations. But cracks began to show in his polished facade as past controversies resurfaced, painting him in a less than flattering light. Despite their growing momentum, the pressure of the case weighed heavily on Linda and Ethan. Linda's shifts at the diner became harder to manage as exhaustion set in, and Ethan struggled to focus on his schoolwork with the constant scrutiny. One evening, Linda found Ethan sitting on the fire escape, staring out at the city lights. Are you okay? She asked, sitting beside him. I'm scared, Mom, Ethan admitted. What if we lose? Linda wrapped an arm around him. We might, but we've already won in one way. We stood up for ourselves. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you. Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. Then we'll win. For you. As the team prepared for trial, Sarah uncovered an email exchange between Peter and one of his lawyers from years ago. In it, Peter explicitly discussed firing Linda to avoid any complications from her pregnancy. It was the smoking gun they had been waiting for. This proves his intent, Sarah said, showing the email to Linda and Ethan. He didn't just ignore his responsibilities, he actively worked to erase you from his life. For the first time, Linda felt the weight of her burden lift slightly. The truth was finally coming to light. With the trial just days away, the team took a rare evening off to recharge. Linda cooked a simple dinner for Sarah and Ethan, and for a few hours, they allowed themselves to laugh and relax. As the evening wound down, Sarah raised a toast. To justice, she said, raising her glass, and to the strength it takes to fight for it. Linda smiled, her heart full despite the challenges ahead. To the people who believe in it, she replied, meeting Sarah's gaze. For the first time in years, she felt ready, not just to fight, but to win. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. The case had captivated the city, drawing reporters, legal enthusiasts, and curious onlookers. The stark contrast between the two sides was evident. Peter Anderson, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, sat flanked by his formidable legal team, exuding confidence. Across the aisle, Linda and Ethan sat with Sarah Parker, their modest demeanor a sharp contrast to Peter's opulence. "Your Honor," Sarah began in her opening statement, her voice steady and clear. "This case is about more than just one man shirking his responsibilities. It's about power, privilege, and accountability. My client, Linda Morales, was wrongfully terminated for being pregnant with Peter Anderson's child. For 15 years, she has endured unimaginable hardship while Mr. Anderson has lived a life of luxury. Today, we seek justice." Whitmore, Peter's lead attorney, countered with his own statement, painting Linda as an opportunist who sought to exploit a wealthy man. "The defense will show that this case is nothing more than a baseless attempt to tarnish Mr. Anderson's reputation," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. The battle lines were drawn. Linda was the first witness. She recounted her years of service at the Anderson estate, her relationship with Peter, and the devastating moment when he cast her out after learning about her pregnancy. Her voice trembled at times, but she held her ground, meeting the jury's gaze with quiet strength. "Why didn't you seek assistance from others?" Whitmore asked during cross-examination, his tone accusatory. Linda straightened in her seat. "Because I believed Peter would do the right thing. I was wrong." Whitmore smirked, attempting to undermine her credibility with questions about her financial struggles and her choice to keep Ethan's parentage a secret for so long. But Sarah's careful preparation ensured Linda's testimony remained intact, her story resonating deeply with the jury. One by one, former employees of the Anderson estate took the stand. Maria Lopez, the nanny, described witnessing the close relationship between Linda and Peter. "He treated her differently," Maria testified. "It was clear they were more than just employer and employee." Robert Kane, the chauffeur, added weight to Linda's claims, recounting the day he drove her to the clinic. "She was heartbroken," he said. "Anderson acted like it wasn't his problem." The defense tried to discredit the witnesses, questioning their motives and suggesting they had been coerced by Sarah. But the testimonies painted a clear picture of a man who used his power to control and dismiss those around him. Ethan insisted on taking the stand. Despite Linda's initial hesitation, "They need to hear what it was like for us," he told her, when he addressed the court. Ethan's words were heartfelt and powerful. "My mom worked so hard to give me a good life," he said, "but there were times we didn't have enough. Times when I wondered why my dad didn't want me. Now I know it wasn't because of me, it was because of him." Whitmore attempted to rattle Ethan, asking pointed questions about his motivations. But Ethan stood firm, his composure belying his age. His testimony left many in the courtroom visibly moved. Peter took the stand, his charm turned up to full effect. He denied any wrongdoing, claiming that Linda had fabricated their relationship to extort him. "She was an employee, nothing more," he said. "These allegations are baseless." Under cross-examination, Sarah exposed cracks in his facade. "If you had no relationship with Ms. Morales, why did you make multiple cash withdrawals during the time of her termination?" she asked. Peter hesitated, his polished demeanor slipping for a brief moment. "It was unrelated," he claimed, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Sarah introduced the email exchange between Peter and his lawyer, which explicitly discussed firing Linda due to her pregnancy. The courtroom buzzed as the emails were read aloud, painting a damning picture of Peter's intent. "Mr. Anderson," Sarah said, her voice steady, "isn't it true that you terminated Ms. Morales specifically to avoid the consequences of fathering her child?" Peter's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury's expressions shifted, the weight of the evidence tipping the scales in Linda's favor. Outside the courtroom, the case dominated the headlines. Public opinion began to shift as details of Peter's actions came to light. Former business associates and acquaintances distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with his growing scandal. Linda and Ethan faced a different kind of attention. Supporters sent letters of encouragement, and community groups rallied around them, offering resources and assistance. For the first time, they felt the tide turning in their favor. As the trial neared its conclusion, Peter's team became increasingly desperate. They introduced last-minute witnesses and attempted to shift blame onto others, including Linda, but each tactic was expertly countered by Sarah, whose calm confidence only grew as the trial progressed. In a private moment, Peter approached Linda in the courthouse hallway. "Drop this," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You won't win." Linda met his gaze without flinching. "I already have," she replied. For Ethan, the trial reached its climax with closing arguments. Sarah's speech was a masterclass in persuasion, weaving together the evidence and testimonies into a compelling narrative. "This case isn't just about Ms. Morales and her son," Sarah told the jury. "It's about sending a message that power and wealth do not place someone above accountability." Peter Anderson abandoned his responsibilities. "But today, you have the chance to ensure justice is served." Whitmore's closing argument attempted to frame Peter as the victim of a baseless attack. But the jury's expression suggested the narrative was losing traction. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the verdict. Peter Anderson was found liable for wrongful termination and ordered to pay child support retroactively, along with damages to Linda for emotional distress. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the weight of the decision sank in. Linda gripped Ethan's hand, tears streaming down her face. It was a victory, not just for them, but for everyone who had ever been silenced by someone more powerful. Peter's face was pale, his carefully constructed world crumbling before the eyes of everyone watching. The courtroom was emptying, but Linda and Ethan remained seated, holding each other as the weight of the victory settled in. The decision had been handed down, but the journey wasn't over. Outside, reporters clamored for a statement, their cameras flashing as Sarah led Linda and Ethan past the crowd. "Justice has been served," Sarah said in a brief statement. "This case is a testament to the strength of individuals who stand up against injustice, no matter how insurmountable it seems." Peter Anderson, surrounded by his crumbling legal team, pushed through the throng of reporters, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. His fall from grace was just beginning. Within days of the verdict, Peter's empire began to show cracks. Former business partners distanced themselves. Investors pulled out of key projects. And social media erupted with calls for boycotts of his companies. Articles detailing his unethical practices circulated widely, eroding his once untouchable reputation. A particularly damning exposé revealed a history of exploitative behavior toward employees, including incidents similar to Linda's case. Whistleblowers began to step forward, emboldened by her victory, turning Peter into a pariah in elite circles. One evening, as Linda and Ethan settled into their apartment, there was a knock at the door. Standing outside was a woman in her 50s, her sharp eyes filled with emotion. "My name is Diane Caldwell," she introduced herself. "I was Peter's assistant for nearly 2 decades. I've been following your case, and I need to speak with you." Diane revealed that she had played a key role in managing Peter's affairs during Linda's employment. "I've lived with the guilt for years," she admitted. "I knew what he did to you was wrong, but I stayed silent to keep my job. Now, with nothing left to lose." Diane handed over a folder containing additional evidence, emails, memos, and records that painted an even darker picture of Peter's actions. "Use this to make sure he never does this to anyone again," she said. Inspired by the new evidence, Ethan decided to take a bold step. Using his artistic talents, he created a series of sketches and illustrations depicting their story, his mother's strength, their struggles, and their fight for justice. He shared the illustrations online, where they quickly went viral. "This isn't just about my family," Ethan wrote in the caption. "It's about everyone who has ever been silenced by someone more powerful." The post resonated with thousands, sparking a larger conversation about class, privilege, and accountability. Ethan's voice became a rallying cry for those seeking justice. The new evidence provided by Diane revealed a startling pattern. Over the years, Peter had used his wealth and influence to cover up multiple scandals, from workplace harassment to questionable business dealings. One particularly shocking revelation was an instance where he had pressured another employee to terminate a pregnancy. These revelations painted a damning picture of Peter as a man who had repeatedly abused his power to avoid accountability. Linda and Sarah decided to share the information with the media, ensuring the public knew the full extent of his wrongdoing. The public outcry reached a fever pitch. Peter's remaining supporters dwindled as calls for further investigations mounted. Regulatory agencies began to scrutinize his business dealings, and lawsuits from former employees piled up. For Linda and Ethan, the turning point was seeing how their fight had inspired others. Letters and messages poured in from people thanking them for their courage. "You've given us hope," one message read. "You've shown that it's possible to fight back." Faced with mounting legal troubles, financial losses, and public disgrace, Peter reached out to Sarah, requesting a private meeting with Linda. "Why should we meet with him?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with anger. "Because it's important to see what he has to say," Sarah replied. "Sometimes, the most powerful victories come from facing those who wronged you." Reluctantly, Linda agreed. They met in a neutral location, where Peter appeared haggard and defeated. His once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by desperation. "I want to settle this," Peter said. "I'll pay whatever you want. Just make this go away." Linda looked at him, her expression unreadable. "It's not about money anymore, Peter. It's about accountability. You don't get to buy your way out of this." Her words left him speechless. For the first time, Peter realized he couldn't manipulate his way out of the situation. While Peter's financial settlements provided Linda and Ethan with a more secure future, it was the symbolic victory that meant the most. Their case had set a precedent, empowering others to come forward and fight against injustice. Community leaders invited Linda to speak at events, where she shared her story and encouraged others to stand up for their rights. Ethan's art became a centerpiece of these gatherings, a reminder of the power of resilience and creativity. With the financial support from the settlement, Linda moved them into a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. Ethan enrolled in a prestigious art school, where he thrived, his talent recognized by teachers and peers alike. Though the scars of their past remained, they looked forward to a brighter future. "We did it, Mom," Ethan said one evening as they sat together, looking out at the city skyline. "We finally have a chance to start over." Linda smiled, her heart full of pride and hope. "We did it together," she replied. In the years that followed, Linda and Ethan's story became a symbol of hope and resilience. The lawsuit not only changed their lives but also sparked a movement, inspiring others to challenge systems of power and inequality. As Linda reflected on their journey, she realized that their fight wasn't just about justice, it was about proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, love, truth, and determination could prevail. Despite the public victory, Linda and Ethan struggled with the emotional aftermath. For Linda, the years of hardship and suppression had left deep scars. She often found herself waking in the middle of the night, haunted by memories of the trial, Peter's betrayal, and the years she spent in silence. Ethan, though outwardly thriving, carried his own burden. His anger toward Peter hadn't dissipated entirely, and he sometimes felt overwhelmed by the attention their story continued to garner. "Mom, is it normal to feel this empty after everything?" he asked one evening. Linda nodded, cupping his face gently. "It's normal, Ethan. Healing takes time. What we went through, it wasn't easy. But we'll get through this together." In an effort to move forward, Linda reached out to her family in Mexico, with whom she had lost contact during her years of struggle. Her younger sister, Sophia, was overjoyed to hear from her. "Linda, it's been too long," Sophia said over the phone. "You should come visit. Bring Ethan. There's so much he needs to see where we came from." Though hesitant at first, Linda realized the trip could be a chance to reconnect with her roots and show Ethan a part of his heritage. They made plans to visit, marking the first time Linda had allowed herself to think about something other than survival in years. Arriving in Mexico, Linda was overwhelmed by a wave of nostalgia and bittersweet memories. The streets of her childhood were both familiar and change, a reflection of her own journey. Ethan was fascinated, his sketchbook never leaving his side as he captured the vibrant colors and life around him. For the first time, he began to see a part of himself he had never fully understood. During a quiet evening with Sophia, Linda opened up about her struggles. "I spent so many years thinking I had to do it all on my own," she admitted, "but being here, with family, I realize how much I missed." Sophia took her hand. "You're not alone anymore, Linda. You never were. And you've raised an incredible son." While in Mexico, Ethan began to ask more questions about his father, their story, and why Linda had chosen to fight. Was it hard to face him in court? He asked one afternoon as they walked through a market. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, Linda admitted, but I had to. For you, for us, and for every person who's ever been made to feel powerless. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand now. It wasn't just about him, it was about showing the world who we are. Back in New York, Linda and Ethan began to rebuild their lives with newfound strength. Ethan's art gained recognition at his new school, and he even received an invitation to showcase his work at a local gallery. Linda, inspired by the people who had supported her, began volunteering at a local community center, helping single mothers navigate the same challenges she had faced. If I can make even one person's path a little easier, she told Sarah during a catch-up coffee, then everything we went through will have been worth it. For Sarah, the case had been a career-defining moment, but it had also taken a toll. Late nights, media scrutiny, and the emotional weight of representing Linda and Ethan had left her drained. One evening, as they worked together on an outreach event, Linda noticed Sarah's fatigue. You need to take care of yourself too, she said gently. You've done so much for us. Don't forget to give yourself the same kindness. Sarah smiled, touched by Linda's concern. It's hard to step back when there's so much to fight for. She admitted, but you're right, maybe it's time I let myself breathe. Though Peter's reputation and empire had crumbled, there were still unresolved questions. Ethan, now older and more reflective, began to grapple with the complexities of his father's actions. Do you think he ever regrets it? Ethan asked Linda one evening. I don't know, Linda replied honestly, but whether he does or not doesn't change what we've built. We've proven we're stronger than what he tried to do to us. Ethan nodded, realizing that his father's regrets, or lack thereof, no longer defined their story. In a surprising twist, Linda received a letter from Peter. It was brief and offered no apology, but it was clear he was reaching out in an attempt to salvage what remained of his dignity. I don't need to read it, Linda told Sarah after showing her the letter. I've already found my closure. I've moved on, Sarah agreed. Sometimes, the best response is no response. The letter remained unopened, a symbolic reminder that Peter no longer held any power over their lives. As their lives settled into a new normal, Linda and Ethan often reflected on how far they had come. During a quiet dinner, Ethan raised a toast. To you, Mom, for being the strongest person I know. Linda laughed, her heart full. To us, Ethan, for proving that no matter what life throws at us, we can rise above it. The clinking of their glasses marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Linda and Ethan's story became a beacon of hope for others. They were invited to speak at events, their journey inspiring those who faced similar struggles. Ethan's art gained widespread recognition, and he was awarded a scholarship to a prestigious art program. Linda, now an advocate for workers' rights, continued to use her voice to create change. As they stood together on the balcony of their new home, looking out at the city lights, Linda felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. We did it, Ethan, she said, wrapping an arm around her son. We found our way. Ethan smiled, leaning against her, and it's only the beginning. Linda and Ethan's story sparked a larger movement. Across the city, and eventually the country, people began to speak out against workplace discrimination and abuse of power. Their case became a landmark example in law schools and advocacy circles. Often referred to as the Morales versus Anderson precedent, community organizations reached out to Linda, asking her to join their efforts to support marginalized workers. She became a sought-after speaker, her story resonating deeply with audiences. If I can stand up to someone like Peter Anderson, Linda told a room of young activists, then so can you. Ethan thrived in his art program, his talent quickly gaining recognition. His sketches, once a private outlet for his emotions, now hung in galleries and exhibitions. His most famous piece, a series titled Unbroken, depicted their journey, from Linda's struggle as a single mother to their triumph in court. During an interview at his first solo gallery show, Ethan was asked how he found inspiration. My mom, he said without hesitation. She taught me to fight for what's right and to never give up. No matter how hard things get. The exhibition received rave reviews, with critics praising Ethan's ability to convey raw emotion and resilience through his work. Linda and Ethan returned to Mexico for a longer visit, this time with a sense of pride and purpose. They spent time reconnecting with family, visiting childhood landmarks, and sharing stories of their journey. During a quiet moment with Sophia, Linda reflected on the path that had brought her here. It's strange, she said, how life brings you full circle. I left here searching for a better future. And now, I feel like I found it. Sophia smiled. You've come so far. Linda. And Ethan, he's proof of everything you've built. Inspired by her experiences, Linda started a foundation to support single mothers and low-income workers facing workplace discrimination. Named the Ethan Fund. The organization provided legal aid, career counseling, and financial support to those in need. I know what it's like to feel powerless, Linda said at the foundation's launch event. But I also know what it's like to find strength. This fund is for anyone who needs that strength. The foundation quickly became a beacon of hope, with Linda's advocacy efforts gaining national attention. One day, while working at the foundation's office, Linda received an unexpected visitor. It was Maria Lopez, the former nanny who had testified in court. Maria, now retired, wanted to thank Linda for giving her the courage to speak out. Your fight gave me a voice, Maria said, her eyes brimming with emotion. I've spent years feeling invisible, but you made me feel seen. Linda embraced Maria, grateful for the reminder of the community they had built through their shared experiences. Sarah Parker, now a well-known civil rights attorney, approached Linda with an idea. We should take this fight further. Sarah said, there are still so many people out there who need our help. Together, they organized a series of workshops and town hall meetings, empowering individuals to stand up against injustice. Their partnership became a cornerstone of Linda's foundation, combining Sarah's legal expertise with Linda's lived experience. Ethan dedicated his next art series to his mother. Titled, Resilience, the collection featured portraits of working-class heroes, immigrants, single mothers, and everyday people who had overcome extraordinary odds. The series debuted to critical acclaim, with one reviewer calling it a celebration of the human spirit. At the opening night, Ethan invited Linda to stand beside him as he addressed the crowd. This collection wouldn't exist without my mom, Ethan said. She's the real artist here. She painted our lives with strength, love, and hope. As Linda and Ethan flourished, Peter's life continued to unravel. His financial empire collapsed under the weight of lawsuits and investigations, and he was forced to sell his mansion and other assets to cover mounting legal costs. A former business associate described him as a shadow of the man he used to be. His arrogance replaced by bitterness and regret. But Linda felt no satisfaction in his downfall. I've moved on, she told Ethan. He's no longer part of our story. Linda was invited to speak at a university graduation ceremony, where she shared her journey with the next generation of leaders. Ethan, now a celebrated artist, sat proudly in the audience. I used to believe that power belonged only to the wealthy, Linda said, but power is something we all have. It's in our voices, our choices, and our ability to stand up for what's right. Never forget that. Her speech received a standing ovation, a testament to the impact her story had on the world. Years later, Linda and Ethan stood together at the opening of a new community center funded by the Ethan Fund. The center offered free childcare, job training, and legal assistance to those in need. As they cut the ribbon, Linda looked at Ethan, her heart full of pride. This is our legacy, she said, a reminder that no matter where we come from, we can create something beautiful. Ethan smiled, wrapping an arm around his mother. And it's only the beginning. The crowd cheered as the doors opened, welcoming families and individuals who would find hope within those walls. Linda and Ethan's journey had come full circle, transforming pain into purpose and creating a brighter future for countless others. Years after their legal victory, Linda and Ethan's lives had become a source of inspiration for countless people. Yet, one unresolved matter continued to weigh on Ethan. The absence of any closure with Peter Anderson. One day, while working on a new art series, Ethan turned to Linda. Mom, do you ever wonder if he's changed? If he regrets what he did? Linda considered the question carefully. I don't know if Peter regrets anything, she said, but if you feel like you need answers, maybe it's time to find them. Ethan's curiosity led him to reach out to Sarah, who reluctantly agreed to help him contact Peter. Closure isn't about him, she reminded Ethan. It's about you. Ethan arranged a meeting with Peter at a neutral location. The once powerful tycoon now appeared as a shadow of his former self, humbled, aged, and defeated. His sharp suit had been replaced with a worn jacket, and his confident demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Why did you do it? Ethan asked, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Why did you abandon us? Peter hesitated, his gaze fixed on the floor. I was a coward, he admitted finally. I thought I could avoid responsibility and protect my reputation. I see now that I was wrong. Ethan studied Peter's face, searching for sincerity. It's not enough to admit it now. Ethan said, what you did hurt us. But it also made us stronger. We didn't need you to survive. The meeting ended without a clear resolution. But Ethan left feeling lighter. He had faced his father. Not for forgiveness, but for himself, a final step in his journey of healing. While Ethan processed his encounter with Peter, Linda took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. She revisited her old journal, the one she had used to document her time working for the Andersons. Each entry reminded her of the woman she once was, hopeful, naive, but also resilient. She decided to turn her journal into a memoir, not just for herself but for others who might find strength in her story. Our voices matter, she wrote in the introduction, even when the world tries to silence us. When Linda's memoir, Unbroken, was published, it quickly became a bestseller. Readers praised its raw honesty and powerful message of resilience. Bookstores held packed readings, and Linda received letters from people around the world who connected with her journey. One evening, as Linda read through a particularly touching letter from a single mother in Texas, she realized the true impact of her story. It's not just about us anymore, she told Ethan. It's about everyone who's ever felt powerless. Ethan's career reached new heights when his series, Legacy of Resilience, was acquired by a major museum. The collection featured bold, vibrant pieces that told the story of struggle, triumph, and transformation. At the exhibit's opening, Ethan gave a heartfelt speech. Art has always been my way of processing the world, he said, but this series isn't just about my story. It's about the power of perseverance, the strength of family, and the belief that we can overcome even the greatest challenges. The audience erupted in applause, and Linda stood proudly among them, tears streaming down her face. Linda's advocacy work continued to grow, with the Ethan Fund expanding its reach. The foundation opened satellite centers in other cities, providing resources to underprivileged communities and creating a network of support for those in need. At the grand opening of the newest center, Linda delivered a speech that captured the essence of her journey. Change starts with one voice, but it grows when others join in. Together, we can create a world where no one feels powerless. The crowd cheered, inspired by her words. During a quiet moment, Linda received a call from an old friend, Clara Hartwell, the diner regular who had once supported her with kind words and small tips. Clara, now retired and living in a small town upstate, invited Linda and Ethan to visit. When they arrived, Clara embraced them warmly. You've come so far, she said, her eyes shining with pride. I always knew you had it in you. The visit reminded Linda of the small acts of kindness that had kept her going during her darkest days. It was a poignant reminder that even the smallest gestures could make a profound difference. Sarah Parker organized a celebratory dinner for everyone who had supported Linda and Ethan throughout their journey. Maria, Robert, Diane, and even Margaret attended, their bonds stronger than ever. To resilience, Sarah toasted, raising her glass, and to the power of community. The room erupted in cheers, a reflection of the shared strength and unity that had brought them through their struggles. On the eve of his next exhibition, Ethan sat on the balcony of their apartment, sketchbook in hand. Linda joined him, sitting beside him in comfortable silence. Mom, Ethan said after a while, do you ever think about how different things could have been? Sometimes, Linda admitted, but then I remember that everything we went through made us who we are today. I wouldn't change a thing. Ethan nodded, understanding her words on a deeper level. Me neither. As the years passed, Linda and Ethan's legacy only grew. Linda's memoir became a staple in classrooms, inspiring discussions about justice and resilience. Ethan's art continued to captivate audiences, with his work featured in galleries worldwide. Together, they built a life filled with purpose, love, and hope. Their story had come full circle, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit could triumph. On the anniversary of their legal victory, Linda and Ethan stood together at the community center they had built, surrounded by friends, family, and supporters. As the crowd applauded, Linda smiled, her heart full. This is what it was all for, she said quietly to Ethan. A brighter future. Ethan grinned. And it's only the beginning. Linda Morales became more than a name, she became a symbol of resilience and justice. The expansion of the Ethan Fund continued. With new centers opening in cities across the country, the foundation launched campaigns to address workplace discrimination, provide free legal aid to low-income workers, and offer scholarships to single parents pursuing higher education. One such event, the Voices of Resilience Gala, became a highlight of Linda's year. The gala celebrated the stories of those who had overcome adversity, many of whom had been directly helped by the foundation. As Linda addressed the crowd, she said, "Every voice that rises against injustice strengthens our movement. Together, we're not just changing individual lives, we're changing the world." Ethan worked tirelessly on what he called his most personal project yet. After months of quiet dedication, he unveiled The Journey, an interactive art installation that combined visual art, soundscapes, and storytelling to immerse viewers in his and Linda's story. The installation opened to rave reviews at a prestigious museum, drawing crowds from across the country. Critics praised its ability to evoke empathy and understanding. With one writing, Ethan Morales doesn't just tell a story, he makes you feel it. At the opening night, Ethan dedicated the piece to his mother. "This is for you, Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "for being the reason I never gave up." Linda, standing in the front row, wiped away tears as she watched her son receive a standing ovation. Diane Caldwell, Peter's former assistant, reached out to Linda with a surprising proposition. "I want to work with you," Diane said, "to help build something meaningful." Recognizing Diane's wealth of experience, Linda brought her on as a consultant for the Ethan Fund. Diane's deep understanding of corporate structures and her passion for justice made her an invaluable asset. Together, they developed new strategies to combat workplace discrimination and promote ethical business practices. "It feels good to finally be on the right side of things," Diane said one day, her voice filled with gratitude. Linda was honored with the Humanitarian of the Year award at a national conference on social justice. The event featured a montage of her journey, from her early struggles as a single mother to her groundbreaking victory in court and her ongoing advocacy work. As Linda accepted the award, she reflected on her path. "This award isn't just for me," she said, "it's for every person who has felt invisible, every voice that has gone unheard. Together, we've proven that change is possible." Ethan and Linda collaborated on a book, Strength in Shadows, combining Linda's narrative with Ethan's artwork. The book offered an intimate look at their journey, blending raw storytelling with vivid illustrations that brought their struggles and triumphs to life. The book became a bestseller, with schools and universities adopting it as a teaching tool. At a signing event, a young girl approached Linda with tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me the courage to stand up for myself," she said. Linda hugged her, overwhelmed by the impact of their work. "You have more strength than you know," she told the girl. "Never let anyone take that from you." Peter Anderson's health began to decline, and news of his passing reached Linda and Ethan one rainy afternoon. The once powerful tycoon had died in relative obscurity, his empire dismantled and his reputation tarnished. Ethan struggled with conflicting emotions. "I don't know if I feel sad or just empty," he admitted to Linda. "You don't have to feel anything, Ethan," Linda said gently. "He was a part of our story, but he doesn't define us. We've already moved forward." Peter's death marked the end of an era, but it also reaffirmed Linda and Ethan's commitment to building something positive from their pain. Years later, Linda and Ethan gathered with friends, family, and supporters to celebrate the 10th anniversary of their legal victory. The event was held at the flagship center of the Ethan Fund, a bustling hub of hope and opportunity. As Linda took the stage to address the crowd, she looked out at the sea of faces, people whose lives had been touched by their work. From single mothers to young artists to former employees who had found justice. "We started this journey with nothing but hope and determination," Linda said, "and look at what we've built together. This isn't just my story or Ethan's story, it's all of ours." The crowd erupted in applause, a testament to the far-reaching impact of their journey. Ethan received an invitation to bring The Journey to an international art exhibition, showcasing his work on a global stage. Linda accompanied him to Paris, where they marveled at how far they had come. Walking through the city's streets, Ethan said. I never imagined we'd be here. Linda smiled. The world is full of surprises. Ethan, and you've worked hard for every moment of this. The exhibition was a resounding success, with critics and audiences alike praising Ethan's ability to tell a universal story of resilience and hope. Linda began mentoring young women who were just starting their own fights for justice. Through workshops and one-on-one sessions, she shared her experiences and encouraged them to believe in their power. One of her mentees, a bright and determined young woman named Sophia, said, "Because of you, I know I can do this." Linda placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Sophia, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way." Linda and Ethan's story became a symbol of what was possible when love, resilience, and justice triumphed over adversity. Their legacy extended beyond their own lives, inspiring change in communities and systems around the world. As they stood together at a fundraising event for the Ethan Fund, Linda turned to Ethan. "This is what I always dreamed of for us," she said. Ethan smiled. "And it's only the beginning, Mom." Together, they looked out at the sea of supporters, knowing that their fight had created a future filled with hope for themselves and for generations to come.